announcement that the United States should own Gaza Strip and turn it into what he called the riviera of the Middle East by displacing its original inhabitant Palestinians and resettling them in the neighboring Egypt and Jordan continues to reverberate days after he made it on February 4th. The Indian government has maintained what many think is prudent silence on the announcement that caused a global outrage. To understand what the proposal looks like from the other side of the world, MCR spoke to the well-known global strategic affairs and security expert Uday Bhaskar from New Delhi. Welcome to Mayank Reports. Uday, it's always a great pleasure to have you.
Mayank, as I often say, that any chat with you, first of all, it's very enjoyable. And secondly, I find that at the end of it, I'm more educated than I was before the chat started.
Oh, so come on, Uday. You're just being very generous. Let's as fantastical as it is, not to mention as cruel as it is, let's game out a scenario where the US does indeed attempt to own, occupy Gaza Strip coercively. What do you think it will unleash in terms of local forces?
Mayank, this particular proposal that has been unveiled by President Donald Trump in his second term, I think all of us were frankly taken aback. And taken aback because, there is a certain gravitas, a certain rectitude, responsibility that we associate with the office of POTUS, the President of the United States. The most powerful country, the country that has taken it upon itself to contribute to the global good and impose the equivalent of a US-led global order. Ever since World War II, and I would say even after the end of the Cold War in 1991, there was a sense that the US was providing a kind of leadership. So it's against that backdrop that President Trump's suggestion was, as I said, completely unacceptable. I'm using a mild term. And if you look at the global reaction, one of the mainstream American papers described it as grotesque. The suggestion that he would be able to take over Gaza and redevelop it and make it a beautiful place, and some very banal kind of adjectives. Apart from grotesque and apart from the fact that it was as outrageous as I think so many adjectives have been used, I'd like to add one to say that it's also very callous. To look at what has happened to the people of Palestine, to look at what has happened to Gaza, and then to very casually in a press conference with the Israeli Prime Minister, who is the perpetrator of this completely disproportionate attack on Palestine because of October 7th, which, by the way, no one is justifying October 7th. We are talking about what followed October 7th and how Prime Minister Netanyahu has gone on this ethnic cleansing. Some people have used the word mass murder. Others have even described this as genocidal. So there is an extreme range about what has happened to Palestine. And then to stand at a press conference and without any reference to what tragedy has befallen, to say that we'll develop this into a lovely waterfront. That to me was extreme callousness. So I'm afraid my responses and reactions are very, very negative. And I don't think this deserves to be gamed, frankly. You can't take 2.3 million people and relocate them as if they were pawns on a chessboard and you move them to another chess table or another chessboard. So I find that, frankly, as I said, completely unacceptable. But I'd be curious to hear from you. You're sitting in the United States. What is the reaction there? Has it fallen along party lines, the civil society outrage? Or do people think that this is a great idea from President Trump?
No, there is complete shock. Even the Republicans, who are basically supine when it comes to Trump, they are not embracing it in any significant way, although they are not coming out quite as openly as they should. But by and large, I think people are stunned. There is a photograph of Trump's chief of staff doing the rounds, where she looks absolutely stunned at that particular moment when Trump announced it. But I'm told he had been thinking about it for several weeks, and a lot of people do not realize. I think sometime last year, his son in law, Jared Kushner, had said something similar in an interview. Not exactly along the lines that Trump is talking about. Trump has, of course, injected liters and liters of steroids into that proposal. But it's been in his mind. I read a report in the New York Times yesterday that even his aides were completely taken aback because it hasn't been discussed. No details have been flashed out. And as is his wont, he just does it sort of as a showmanship gimmick and wait for the reaction and then decide. I mean, left to him, he would like to do it because if you, his entire approach to the rest of the world is like a piece of real estate. Wherever, if you look at Greenland, the way he's approached Greenland, or even the Panama
Panama
Canal,
Canal.
everything is just about possessing a particular property. And that's where he comes from for everything. It's about making money. It's
Yeah.
astonishing.
No, I agree totally, as I said, which is why I think, if you look at this in terms of the larger message, on Monday, 10th of February, President Trump would complete 3 weeks in office. And I think what has happened, very objectively, as I said, I'm sure it's for American citizens to arrive at a determination about the president they've elected and how they perceive him after the first 3 weeks in office. But for the rest of us as global citizens, I think what is cause for concern is the kind of credibility that the United States is losing very rapidly. And I think that is cause for concern at a time when the world is looking for a certain kind of objective and meaningful leadership from the US, whether it's on climate change or it's in the war on Ukraine or what is happening in Gaza and the rebuilding. And, if you are a great power, a certain responsibility devolves upon you because of your profile. And I think President Trump has tarnished it in all of 3 weeks. And that, I think, is the greater, I would say, cause for concern at a global level. And the only silver lining, if one could put it that way, is that collectively, I think the global political leadership has pushed back.
Right.
There is no single leader that I can think of who has endorsed and said, wow, this is a great Trump miracle. No one has said that. A lot of people have been reticent, including India. They have not said anything that is critical. But no one is saying this is a great idea. And among the 5 members of the Security Council, the permanent members, both China and Russia, I think, have made the point that this is completely untenable, unacceptable, and at some point, the two-state solution would have to be revisited, which means looking at the long-term interests of the Palestinian people. So I think this pushback, or at least lack of endorsement, is in itself a signal. And in the last 12 hours, I've been looking at social media and looking at some other blogs and sites in the United States. It appears, and I could be wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this because you're there on the spot, that they are trying to walk him back from this position and say that it's not what is perceived to be, and he's actually very kind and he's very concerned and he wants to help in the rebuilding, etc., etc. But I think the damage is done in terms of, as I said, credibility and his own image, which he was trying to project. I mean, if you remember his remarks to the people at Davos,
Right.
there he was trying to project a statesman-like kind of profile, a statesman who brings that rare common sense to the table. And he was trying to assure all the leaders, the corporate leaders, the market leaders, etc., in the Davos meeting, that he has a problem for everything. Give him a problem and he'll give you a fix. I think all that is now being seen, perhaps sadly enough, as an extension of reality TV, which is again something that he has been nurtured in. So these are all, to me, as a global citizen, as someone who's outside of the United States, but who does observe these things as one more
Right.
concerned global citizen.
But
It's great
you
disappointment
mentioned,
because climate change is waiting for some kind of meaningful action, and he's been quite flippant about it. We'll walk out of it.
I mean, he's officially called it a hoax. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
but you talking about him walking it back. His aides are certainly
yeah,
trying that, but he has in fact doubled down. It's interesting. A CNN anchor had to actually use the term that he's both walking it back and doubling it down. How do you
yeah, yeah,
backtrack and double down? But that's his style,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he thoroughly enjoys. A lot of what he does is for the effect. And somewhere in that attitude is also a grain of substance where he actually means it. And people, I think, need to take that seriously. Left to him, he would do it. Left to him, he would do it.
Yeah, I think you're right that it's a question about he is now very assured in his second term. And I think, as I said, even in under 3 weeks, he is trying to evolve a style of governance, both in terms of the United States and the larger global issues where the United States has a very, very important footprint, to try and project an image of I'll come out with a completely new idea and just trust me, it'll work, that kind of certitude.
Right.
But unfortunately, this was all, a kind of theatrics, a kind of playing up to the gallery. And my sense again, and here again, I benefit from your thoughts and your views. I'm sure at some point, for any leader who's elected in this manner, the honeymoon is over after 100 days, as we have often seen in India. So from Jan 20th, which was the swearing in, if you were to go to 3 months plus 10 days, we are looking at end April. And I think the American voter who supported and who voted, for Mr. Trump will expect some results, whether it's in terms of the price of gas or he made a big thing about groceries. You may remember that interview where he went on and on about, do you know what groceries are? Things like that. When
Right.
you buy eggs and you buy ham, etc., etc. Now, that is going to come back, and I think the voter would expect that there should be some return on the investment they have made on Mr. Trump. And if that doesn't happen, then I think you will see that the president would have to completely, I think, rewire and see how he's going to bring more substance to governance, as opposed to, as I said, the optics of governance.
Yeah. You talked about honeymoon. Honeymoon is in his mind, which never ceases. That's
Yeah,
one thing
yeah,
people should remember. The second is, I think, his 80 million voters, no matter what happens, they don't seem to care
yeah,
where he goes. And the problem with Trump is that he has no ideological anchor in any sense of the word. He doesn't
yeah,
have firm convictions about anything. These are all floating things in his mind. So maybe tomorrow he'll say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I forgot." You might remember he had
yeah,
been
yeah,
saying that once he becomes president again, within 24 hours, the Ukraine war will be over.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
No one is reminding him that what happened.
Right.
That's how he. I mean, people have given him such wide berth so repeatedly,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
just as president, but throughout his life,
yeah.
that he thinks that's for his for the takings. I mean, I really marvel at his luck.
No,
He
apart from luck, I think, Mike, I'd like to add here that he's very adept. I think if you look at the manner in which he was able to, I think, project himself in the campaign, you made reference to
Yeah,
the 80 million voters who now trust him almost like he's an extension of, God's gift to
yeah,
America to make it great again. I mean, that's their core belief. And I think you must give it to Mr. Trump that he's been able to use social media. He's been able to nurture that particular constituency that supports him, whether it is the media outlets, the social media outlets, or all the various groups, the born again Christians, and whether it's the Midwest or the Deep South, or those who are subscribing to the kind of things that he's set up as, straw men, if you will, the anxiety, the fear about, the paranoia about the immigrant, and be careful about them, they're eating your pets. Remember, that was one of those
yeah,
big things he said in the campaign.
yeah.
And I think he's picked up a few of these and done a trapeze, which has been very successful. And that virtual world that he's created, that to me is the success of Mr. Trump. And he's not alone. There are other leaders who are, I think, similarly projecting themselves. And
Right.
also, I think, getting maximum mileage about the Tina factor. There is no alternative. I mean, in America, now the belief is that the Democrats are in disarray.
Right.
Joe Biden let the side down. Kamala Harris was a non starter. And they won't get their act together in a hurry. So you have no option but to stay the course with Mr. Trump.
Right. You
So
know,
these are all, I think, some of the elements that he's maximized.
in terms of reality, what do you think a proposal like this does to the idea of two state idea? I mean, Palestine and Israel living side by side. Do you think this could end it?
No, I would say that if you just look at the Trump proposal, if you could just call it that for our discussion, it has gutted the two state, meaning there'll be no people.
Right.
The 2.3 million people of Palestine would be quote unquote expelled.
Right.
They would be sent to other countries. Now, of course, there is complete, opposition. No country wants to take Palestinian refugees for their own reasons. So that's a non-starter. But if you do not take that on board and just talk about the proposal at the two-state, my reading is the Trump proposal guts completely the two-state option. And it also, I think, is an extension of the words that we used earlier, callous and cruel, that not only have you, first of all, subjected the people of Palestine to the kind of disproportionate attack that Israel has embarked upon, you are now expelling them. And to me, I think the gravest or the most serious kind of, gaming that you can do as you go down this path is erasure. You are erasing Palestinian identity, meaning that when these Palestinians, hypothetically, not for a moment am I subscribing to this, but suppose they were go to country A, B, or C, a Jordan, an Egypt, or
Right.
some country in Latin America or South Africa or wherever, not so, I mean South America, that you are able to hypothetically send these people. I mean, you can come up with a Trump plan and say 2.3 million. Okay, find 23 countries, and each of them will take 2.3 divided by 23 and say that this is an easy number to handle. And then what you do is that their identity is merged maybe 10, 20 years down the road. So effectively, from expulsion, it is erasure of a whole people. And that there's an enormity about that. So these are the kind of issues I think that the Trump proposal, would lead to, which is why, as I said, words like preposterous, grotesque, callous, cruel, unacceptable, untenable, all come to mind.
Right.
But we are now living in a very strange kind of political landscape where someone who's as I said, who holds the office of the president of the United States can casually make such a proposal
You
and
know,
then
not
say that I'll walk it back. You know,
you know, not
and
with, sorry, too, but notwithstanding the ludicrousness of it all, how is it that New Delhi has not said anything at all?
well, I think there's a tactical dimension which is New Delhi is currently preparing for the visit of Prime Minister Modi.
Right.
So knowing Mr. Trump's own penchant for you know being very sensitive to any form of criticism, I think New Delhi is being prudent and not saying anything because they want to keep the bilateral on track. I mean, he's capable. He has said things. I mean, the Canadian Prime Minister, if you remember, the way he spoke about him in a very disparaging way
Right.
when the first mention was made about Canada as the 51st state. And when the Canadian President, Mr. Trudeau, tried to push back, the kind of, public lashing,
Right.
again, completely deplorable, unacceptable in terms of turn of phrase, was what Mr. Trump unleashed on his Canadian counterpart. So I think Delhi has been prudent and has deliberately, I think, this is my reading. I haven't seen any statement coming out of Delhi on this. You know.
And right, perhaps rightly so, as you point out. But here is somewhat of a digression, since you mentioned Mr. Modi's upcoming visit and the fact that India has dramatically climbed down on tariffs, unlike in recent past. What do you make of it? I mean, what does it do to the prime minister's image at home as a tough talking barrel-chested politician.
Well, at the moment, I think the Indian government and Mr. Modi himself personally are dealing with the fallout of the illegal immigrants from India who've been deported.
Right.
They've landed in Amritsar, and there's a lot of outrage about the fact that they were handcuffed and they were not allowed to use the toilet when they were in the flight. And all these reports are now doing the rounds. It also came up for scrutiny in Parliament today, Friday. So I think that is the first firefighting that they are doing as far as the Trump executive orders are concerned. On tariffs, I think unlike China, which has a certain amount of leverage with the United States, and they are in a way pushing back and trying to suggest to the United States that China can also impose tariffs, particularly on strategic material, critical material that the US needs. I mean, tungsten is a good example.
Right.
India doesn't have that kind of leverage. So I think India again is being prudent. It has a surplus with the United States in terms of trade. It's a modest amount, but it's surplus. It wants to keep that particular, I think, fine balance. Because for the long term, India also needs to work on the whole question of the legal migrant, whether it's the IT worker, the doctor, the professional. So I think it's a very prudent, tactical kind of approach that let's not rake up things now till such time as the visit is over, and let's see the fine print of what Mr. Trump wants to impose on India. But again, I think there was a very smart move in the budget. You must have noticed it because you have an eagle eye, Mayank, which is that in the budget speech of the finance minister, they reduced the tariffs on high-end motorcycles. They didn't use the word Harley Davidson, but
They
definitely
could. They might as well have said that.
yeah. So I mean, that's again a signal, a gesture to Mr. Trump,
Yeah,
who
that was
mentioned
his
this in his
obsession
first
for a
column, if
long
you
time.
remember,
He
when he
kept
came to
talking
India.
about Harley Davidson quite frequently for some strange reason. So no, this is quite. I don't know if this will go the distance, but for now at least, he seems to be sticking to his gun, saying that he does want it.
Yeah, I know. I think they're trying to see how to allow him to walk back in a Trump-like manner.
Yeah,
As you said, he can do two contradictory positions and maintain both.
yeah,
So I think the Trump team is now doing some acrobatics to see how that can be possible.
yeah.
As far as at least the media is concerned, and say that yes, his heart is bleeding for the Palestinians, but at the same time, he is not oblivious to the real estate potential of Gaza, devoid of its people.
Well, his heart is bleeding in a strange way if he wants the Palestinians out of that area, right?
You remember that book, Eyeless in Gaza?
Yeah,
I think now we are talking about, a situation where the US president is soulless in Gaza.